Hi, I'm Pastor Dave, teaching evangelist with Lamb and Lion Ministries. Not too long ago, I was speaking in El Paso, Texas. I was sitting in the hotel lobby waiting for my ride when I heard a young woman working at the front desk ask a coworker if she thought God was coming back soon. Now, obviously, hearing a question like that caught my attention. Now, she did not know who I was or why I was even there, but I turned and I faced her and I asked her, well, do you think God's coming back? With all that's happening in the world, she says, I think he is coming back. So now I wanted to engage in a conversation with her. So I stood up and I walked over to the front counter and I asked her, I said, well, do you go to church? She said she did not. So I asked her, then why do you think that, we might be living in end times? She admitted that she really had no answers. She said there was just something that she felt inside, that something was going to happen. And I agreed. And I said, well, maybe we all should go back to church. She smiled and agreed, and this allowed me to share some end-time prophecy with her before we ended our conversation. Now, shortly after that, I was getting a haircut. It is getting easier to do these days because the hair is not so much. But anyhow, I was getting a haircut, and I did not know the lady cutting my hair, and she did not know me. And for most of the time, she was pretty quiet. But then suddenly, she asked me if she could ask me a question. I said, sure. She hesitated. Then she said, do you think we're living in the end times? To myself, I said, seriously? What are you telling me, Lord? I kept my composure, and I asked her if she thought were we living in the end times. She said she didn't know why. Again, it was something she felt inside, and I did the same thing I did in Texas. I asked her, I said, well, do you attend church? She said no. She was Jewish. Now, that really intrigued me. I wonder if she believed Jesus was coming back. And she said, well, because she was Jewish, she really wasn't sure about Jesus. But there was just too much happening in the world for it not to be towards the end. Again, this conversation allowed me to share some more end-time prophecy with somebody. They say things happen in threes. After those two divine appointments, a recent survey came across my desk, which said 4 in 10 U.S. adults believe that we are living in the end times. Now, this was according to a survey done by the Pew Research Center. Now, time out. Let me acknowledge the source of this information. The Pew Research Center is not a right-wing evangelical organization. I say that because I don't want people to think that I am only presenting information that comes from the far-right conservative voices. The Pew Research Center is a think tank based in Washington, D.C. And what they do is they conduct public opinion polls, demographic research, and surveys on various topics, things like social issues and public beliefs and habits. So, the Pew Research Center, they did not start out wondering if Americans believe if we're living in the end times. This research was due to the results of a prior survey on a completely different subject. In April of 2022, Pew Research conducted a survey to find out how concerned Americans were or are about climate change. And in gathering those results, they found that many Americans expressed little to no concern about climate change. And the interesting nugget was why people felt this way. Why was there such a lack of concern about climate change? Well, the people explained that they believe there's much bigger problems in the world today, and they overwhelmingly said they believe God is in control and that they do not think that there really is any change in the climates. Now, that connection, the results showing about people believing God is in control of the climate, led Pew Research to do another survey. So they began to research what were people's views about God. Pew Research conducted this end time survey 8 months after that climate change poll. Now, this follow-up survey revealed that in the United States, 39% of adults, 4 out of 10, say they believe we are living in the end times. 58% say they don't believe we are living in the end times, but 40% say yes, 58% says no. And interesting, Christians are divided on this question. 47% of believers say we are, 49% of believers say we are not. However, the 3 in 10, 29% believe people from non-Christian religions, Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, And 23% of those with no religious affiliation say that we are living in the end times. 1/3 of non-believers and 1/4 of people of other faith believe the days we're living in are the end times. This survey also explored Americans' views about a very fundamental belief of Christianity, the belief that Jesus will return to earth, meaning his second coming. When asked if Jesus will return to earth someday, more than half of all U.S. adults, 55%, said yes. Those who responded, they said that they believed Jesus would return to earth, but they were asked how certain are they that this would happen during their lifetime. Well, that number wasn't so high. 1 in 10% of the Americans say they assume the second coming will happen or will probably occur during their lifetime, whereas 27% said they're not sure if Jesus will return in their lifetime, and 19% said there's no way Jesus, he's definitely not coming back in their lifetime. Now, the survey also asked about other eschatological beliefs held by just the average American adult. People were asked if they believed Jesus would return after a worsening of global conditions, which is a consistent view with a premillennial view. Or do you think Jesus will return after the world begins to improve, the conditions improve, which would be a post-millennial view? So get this. This survey revealed pre-millennial beliefs are far more common than post-millennial, and by a wide margin, 20% to 3%. That's almost a 7-to-1 margin. Post-millennial, they believe that the world will gradually improve and the 1,000 years will happen prior to Jesus' physical return. The amillennial, they believe the 1,000-year time is already happening, and it's more of a spiritual thing. It's not a literal 1,000-year period. And those who have a pre-millennial view, they say the return of Christ will usher in the 1,000-year reign and is often connected with circumstances in the world getting far worse until his return. So because of this, Pew Research classified anyone as a pre-millennialist if they say the world situation will get worse and then Jesus will return. And again, those polled overwhelmingly by a 20-to-3 margin agreed with a pre-millennial view. Now this caused me to wonder, how about pastors? What about evangelical churches? Where do they stand on end-time theology? And thankfully, Lifeway Research, which is a Christian organization, they surveyed 1,000 evangelical pastors, asking them about their views on the return of Christ, about Bible prophecy, and about end time specifically. Here are some of the results. 64% say their church does not require staff to hold specific end time belief. 60% say that the premillennial best fits their view on the end times. But 21% are amillennialists, pastors, and 9% are post-millennial. 57% say that their current views of the end times match most of their congregation views, and 24% said their congregation does not really have a consensus, does not really have a view on the end times, and 14% said their congregation holds a completely different view than they do when it comes to end times. 30% of pastors said preaching end time prophecy from the book of Revelation is somewhat important, and 10% said preaching end time prophecy from the book of Revelation is not important. 30% somewhat, 10% not at all. 32% of pastors said spending time studying end times is somewhat important, and again, 10% said studying end times is not important at all. 27% of pastors agreed that interpreting the end times is a divisive issue within their churches. 40% of pastors believe that the Christian church has fulfilled or replaced the nation of Israel in God's plan. Folks, that's replacement theology, which is false teaching. 56% expect Jesus to return in their lifetime. But only 23% of pastors say they have traveled to Israel, and 77% said they've not been to Israel and don't plan on going. 24% said they speak to their churches about end times maybe about once a month. Isn't that interesting? All these numbers on end times from pastors and churches, and you wonder why we're not learning and talking about end times. So here's my question to you. What do you believe? Where do you stand? I think all we can really do right now is look up and say, Maranatha, Lord Jesus,